You're live, Chair.
Welcome everyone to today's meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee, which is being held fully remotely and in accordance with temporary legislation changes to allow the Council to continue to operate in an open and transparent way. Decisions made at today's meeting are just as applicable as in a traditional meeting setting, provided the number of members in attendance ensures the meeting remains quorate. I would like to remind members that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Can I request that you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking, and also ensure that you have your chat bar open for voting purposes. I don't have any apologies for absence from councillors. If there are any other apologies that need to be recorded, please make this clear in the chat and they will be recorded in the minutes. I'm now going to move on to the formal agenda. The first item would be declarations of interest. I'm happy for members to indicate in the chat if they have anything, any declaration that they wish to make as we go through the agenda. The next item on the agenda is the public open forum. Members of the public wishing to participate would have had to notify their attention in advance of the meeting. We had no notifications, so I'm going to go on to the next agenda item, which is to note the action list from the previous meeting. We have two of those. The first one was for internal audits. Now, if Mr. Walton is here, perhaps you could tell us where we are with this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so there was a reference in the draft annual governance statement to minutes of ward meetings. That's now shown in paragraph 56 of the annual governance statement within the annual accounts. That should of course read area committee meeting minutes. So there is an action there that we need to get that corrected before the accounts are finalised.
Thank you for that. So I'll consider that dealt with. The next action list item was about information breaches and data protection. Now, I know that Sian Hayward circulated a response to this on 20th of July. I think it was Councillor Easton who asked the original question. Does Sian Hayward's response answer your query, Councillor Easton?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it resolves the question. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'll also then consider that dealt with.
Thank you.
So we're moving on to agenda item 5, which is a progress report on Audit Wales's proposals for improvement. The paper is from officers in Monmouthshire County Council, so I'm going to ask Emma Davis to introduce the paper, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Emma Davis, Performance Officer. Good afternoon all. This report provides committee members with an update of progress against the proposals for improvement that have resulted from Audit Wales reviews up until July 2021. So it's to provide assurance to members that proposals are being adequately addressed and sufficient progress is being made. This report would usually be provided on an annual basis. However, due to the impact of the pandemic last year, there has been a delay to reporting. This may also have impacted on the progress against some of the proposals, so these will have moved forward at a slower pace than anticipated. Appendix 1 in the report contains the open proposals with an update of activity against them. Audit Wales has, of course, also been impacted by the last 18 months and have adjusted their working practices accordingly. We've been in regular contact with our audit leads and would like to thank them for their flexibility and close working relationship with us to negotiate our audit work alongside our pandemic response. Auditors themselves have amended their usual practices to undertake work providing real-time capture and sharing of some of the learning from the past 18 months and the experiences across all audited bodies. This is meant to move away, in some cases, from the formal proposals for improvement that we're accustomed to a more narrative reporting style that identifies novel and emerging practices and relevant points of learning. Appendix 2 contains details of reports and proposals for improvement that have been closed with an update of activity against them. And Appendix 3 contains information on the national reviews that have been issued since the last report. These do not directly relate to Monmouthshire County Council, but have been shared with the relevant service areas for them to consider any learning points that may be applicable to them. And it's worth pointing out here that Audit and Governance Committee are able to refer these reports on to any scrutiny committees where they feel that the reports require further consideration. Audit Wales reports that relate to Monmouthshire County Council specifically, and their accompanying management responses are presented to Governance and Audit Committee throughout the year as they're produced. So as such, much of the information in this report will possibly be familiar to you. All of the reports, including our management response, are available on the performance management section of the Hub, the Council's intranet site for members to view should they wish. So that's it from me, Chair. I shall pass it back to you for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I'll just remind the committee of what your recommendations are, that members consider the current position of proposals and future actions being taken to address them, seeking assurance that adequate progress is being made. And the second recommendation is that members refer on any issues contained within the Audit Wales national studies to other committees for consideration where they identify there are findings of particular relevance to the council. So I'm going to throw it open to the committee then for comments and questions. So Councillor Easton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Emma, again. Met you this morning. Could you go to page 9 on the appendices regarding the environmental health and the environmental health activities over the last 18 months to do with the pandemic? Has the pandemic affected environmental health's normal day-to-day running of their business? Has it affected in a detrimental way, or have we managed to keep abreast of those day-to-day matters which come in the way of environmental health? I see they're tied up with the Environmental Health Board and other outside bodies on the test, trace and protect. They've had a lot of work to do. I know they've been diverted to certain work, but how has it affected the overall requirement for the authority? Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. We've actually got a member of the environmental health team here. If I might invite Hugh Owen in to answer your question. Yes.
Good, Hugh. Hello, Hugh.
Hello, Tony.
Send me give a dog a red cardboard, please.
I will. Good afternoon, Chair, members and colleagues, and thank you, Tony, for that question. Yeah, you're probably all aware that environmental health, we split into 2 teams. I'm principal officer of the general public health team, and we've also got my colleagues who deal with food safety and health and safety and more business related matters. So certainly the team that deals with food hygiene matters, health and safety issues very closely related to business, then yes, a lot of their work has obviously been put on hold with the businesses, etc., closed over the pandemic, and they've been working closely with the businesses throughout the various waves and the lockdown measures with regards to the reopening of those businesses, and the officers in that team have otherwise been supporting fully the test, trace and protect activities. My team, we tend to get involved in the other public health related matters, which range from air pollution, housing enforcement. You mentioned dog fouling and red card, so the basic environmental street scene matters, Tony, and that's been that work has been continuing unabated throughout the pandemic. We've been responding to complaints as normal. of interest perhaps to the committee. Certainly from my team, we've found over the last 12-18 months quite an escalation in the complaints and service demand for my team. Certainly when the first wave hit, it seems a long time ago now, we had an increase in bonfire complaints, smoke complaints, and noise complaints as well. I think, you know, it's affecting more people who are at home and conscious of what was going on. So in summary, yes, certainly we've been impacted. Colleagues in the food team working closely with businesses. They've been haven't been doing very routine hygiene inspections, etc. Obviously, when the businesses are closed, but they've worked closely, continuing to work closely with those businesses as they are reopening, and giving advice, etc. And from my team's perspective, it's been very much business as normal.
Thank you, Chair, and I hope to see you in my ward with Michael Richardson shortly. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right, thank you, Hugh. Is there anyone else who wishes to ask any questions or raise any points? I'm not getting anything. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to move on to the next agenda item now, but I will just remind members to turn off their cameras and microphones when they're not actually participating in the meeting. Thank you. Okay, so the next agenda item is going to be the Statement of Accounts 2021, and the recommendations are that the committee should note the draft statement of accounts and highlight any queries and comments, and note that the audited statement of accounts for 2021 will, prior to be presented to council, will be reviewed again by this committee in the autumn. So I'm going to hand over now to Jonathan Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. I know there's a few sound issues earlier.
Can I just stop you there, Jonathan?
Sorry.
I see that Phil Murphy has raised his hand, and I just wondered whether he wants to put something in as a precursor.
No, I'll wait for Jonathan to.
Okay, I'll just add.
But I have got a point to raise as soon as he's finished.
Okay, well, I'll make sure you come in. Okay, Mr. Davis, sorry.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, good afternoon, members. Jonathan Davis, Acting Assistant Head of Finance here at Monmouthshire. Yes, as the Chair's pointed out, this report covers off the draft statement of accounts for Monmouthshire County Council for 2020-21, and this would normally have come to Audit Committee slightly earlier in the year. Under current legislation, the accounts were due to be produced and published by the authority by the 31st of May. Obviously, it's been quite an exceptional time again, and you know, we haven't been immune from that in the finance section. So we've had limited staff resources, and I think we've rightly focused on reporting our outturn position through various committees for the end of the year, and look to ensure the ongoing financial sustainability before we really look to produce this you know, considerable document. It's 103 pages, and you know, a lot of it is you know, highly regulated, and the format is set out by statute. So because we were missing the deadline, we had to produce a notice, and that notice was placed on the council's website on the 28th of May. Subsequent to that, we have finalised the draft statements, and they were signed off by the responsible financial officer on the 21st of July, and they were subsequently handed over to Audit Wales to begin the audit process. So the conclusion of that audit process will come in the autumn, and the audited statement of accounts and the findings from the audit will be reported back to this committee prior to them being seen by council, which is timetabled for the November council meeting, and members will have a further opportunity in the autumn to scrutinise those audited accounts or raise any issues they may have. I'm not going to take you through the detail of the statements. Like I say, there's a considerable amount of information in here. The main points around the primary financial statements have been outlined in Appendix 2, and we've also tried to give a background to understanding the financial statements, which was a guide that SIP for themselves produced some time ago now, but it gives a useful outline, I guess, to members of what they should be looking for and the areas to focus on for scrutiny of the considerable document. So, Chair, I'll leave it there, and probably we'll get more out of the questions really in terms of this report. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Jonathan, for a superb effort in getting these out under very difficult circumstances. But I can't let it go without asking about the considerable increase in the deficit on the pensions reserve. I know that's really turned the accounts upside down, really. So can you give us some background on that and give us some comfort as to the effect on the overall balance sheet of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the question, Councillor.
Excuse me, Chairman, could Jonathan direct us to which part of the report you're referring to regarding pensions? I know it's in here, just tell me the page number and I'll know so I can follow through, please.
If you go to the Appendix 2.
Yes, right at the beginning there.
It's page 140, or it's page 146 electronically. But it's in Appendix 2, a couple of pages down.
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much, and sorry to interrupt, Chairman, but it'll make it clearer for me, or hopefully. Thanks.
I can understand why you wanted to interrupt there, Councillor Smith, but I would ask people if they wish to ask questions or whatever, that they do use the hand facility so that we can maybe make the meeting run as smoothly as we can.
Taken, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thanks, Councillor Murphy. You're probably remiss of me not to mention the significant increase in pension fund liability that, like you say, has quite morphed the balance sheet figures, and the actual liability is projected to increase by £76.4 million. So I think firstly it's important to note that we are in the middle of a triannual valuation by the actuary on the pension fund. So these changes or the increase in pension liability won't crystallise until that next valuation is carried out. And what I mean by that is that we won't see any increase in our requirement to pay over contributions to the fund until that valuation is complete. So this merely gives us an indication of which way the liability might be going. But alongside that, the key drivers in this increase are mainly around the discount rate used by the actuaries and the inflation factor used. So I think if we take us back maybe 15 months to March 2020, the discount rate used at that time by the actuaries when calculating the liability was based on an economy and a market which was pretty much in turmoil. The discount rate is based on government yields, and those were highly impacted by the outbreak of the pandemic at that time. So part of what we're seeing here is a year-on-year movement where those yields have stabilised over the past 15 months, and those assets that the pension fund holds are now forecast to return less than they were 15 months ago. So that's one of the main drivers for the change, but probably the biggest impact comes from the inflation factor being used, and this has come about from a requirement for the fund to base its inflation using what's called CPIH from the 2030 year onwards. So CPIH would include housing costs in its calculation, which has the effect of increasing the rate of inflation being applied to the payments made from the pension fund. So that's quite a significant impact on the liability. That's come about from a regulation change in December 2020, so we wouldn't have known about that back 15 months ago when the 1920 accounts were produced. So I think my final comments would be, Chair, that this is quite a technical area, which is why actuaries are involved in calculating this, and it's even more complicated by the fact that actuaries have to amend their forecasts to fall in line with accounting standards. So it makes it really difficult to pin down some of those reasons why we're seeing a shift. But we're certainly in discussion with the pension fund to understand some of this and to understand whether it's going to result in a physical requirement on us to increase our contributions year on year from 22-23 onwards. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to turn this back to Councillor Murphy now, who's got a supplementary.
Yes, and you've just touched on it, Jonathan. I'll ask it again, though, just for clarity, because I know people are going to be concerned about it, and I'm sure the answer is no. But have you got any indication at all as to what the effect on the budget is likely to be in terms of increased contributions? Or we literally, as you were alluding to just then, got to wait until we get guidance on it? Some sort of indication would be extremely useful if you've got it, but I suspect you haven't. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, we don't have any indication at the moment. As I said, that triennial valuation is a very detailed calculation, even more so than the work that goes into it in the interim. So until that's carried out, we won't have any real indication of what that shift could be. But what I would say is that any shift in liability would look to be recouped over quite a significant period of time. So that will be spread out across quite a long period and number of financial years. So that's not going to be a hit in the one big hit in the short term, let's say.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Chair. I think I saw the smoke come out of Phil's chimney then, because it's exactly the same question to start with about the pensions liability. But as a supplementary to what you've just said, has any effects of investments changed which have helped or not helped the the liability to be at that level? For example, green decisions, eco decisions within the investment portfolio?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I would need to I'd need to direct that question to the pension fund themselves. I know they've got a policy on sustainable investment that they report on, but I haven't seen any minutes of the pension fund committee as yet to see what the latest is on that. So wouldn't be in a position to comment on that, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Jan. One question to do with the schools. Well, they weren't deficits anymore. Schools are in surplus now, bar two. How will that position they're in change their way of reducing their surpluses as they stand at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. So we had, as you correctly point out, we had a significant amount of grants awarded very late on in the 2021 financial year for schools, mainly in relation to maintenance costs and also in recovering educational standards. And that resulted in all but 2 schools, I think, being in surplus at the end of 2021. So we asked all schools with significant surpluses to come up with investment plans on how they should look to invest those surplus funds in line with the guidance from Welsh Government that stipulates that schools shouldn't carry high surplus balances year on year. I think the limits are around 50,000 for a primary and 100,000 for a secondary. So all schools have replied on that and given us their plans going forward as to how they're going to use those. But clearly, that needs to be in line with the expectation for those grants to be used in terms of recovering those educational standards which have been severely impacted by the pandemic and the conditions and restrictions in place. So those forecasts will be included in the monitoring reports that will come this year to Cabinet, and that'll outline how much of that surplus balance of I think around 3.5 million is going to be used in year.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. I just wanted to check, have we got an action point there, Jonathan, that you're going to see what you can find out about eco or green investments, as how it affects the pension funds? So we could just minute that as an action point.
That's absolutely fine, Chair. I can come back on that.
Thank you. Peter Davis, Head of Resources.
Thank you, Chair. Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Executive, Chief Officer for Resources and Section 151 Officer for the Council. I just thought it'd be helpful just to sort of just add one supplementary point to, and all credit to John in terms of both explaining the reason for the increase in the pension reserve, the deficit balance, and furthermore in responding quite succinctly and clearly, actually, just in terms of the questions that have been asked. I think the one supplementary point just to make, and I think it responds to Councillor Murphy's supplementary question. I think even if we get to that position of at the next triennial evaluation, where there is a need to increase employer contribution rates, John is absolutely right that that's obviously looked to be managed over an extended period, but also it's important to highlight that will not happen in a big bang way. What we've had, and previously when we've had increases in deficits to manage, which has been an ongoing position, we've seen contributions increase, the contribution rate increase gradually over a period of time in order to look to manage the deficit back down. So I guess from a budgetary control, medium-term financial planning perspective, at least we can, we want to get advance notification of that. I think the second point to make really is one around, the reasons that John's described for the increase in the pension deficit. I guess, John, they are not unique to us. They're not, in fact, unique to the Greater Gwent Greater Gwent Torfaen Pension Fund. They will be issues that will impact upon pension funds right across the UK. So I can only imagine that there will be certainly pressures placed upon UK government, certainly in terms of it considering, settlements, funding settlements for local government, that they will need to take consideration, obviously, of those increased pay bills and the contributions that need to be made. So probably just a couple of comments there. I think finally, just in terms of just assisting John, I think, and to the point of you made, Chair, in terms of an action to be taken away, there is a responsible and ethical investment group that has been established and which reports now into the Greater Gwent Torfaen Pension Fund. They have successfully manage the pension fund to, I think it's moved to about 20% of their fund now has gone into a sustainable fund. But clearly, in order to do that, those funds will still need to hit specific benchmarks in terms of returns. So I think it's just important to just make that point. Also, I think, John, if you've not already confirmed it, I think the investment assets of the pension fund have obviously pulled back from the impact that they had on the 31st of March of 2020, just on subsequently to the pandemic. And obviously markets were affected, I guess, at that sort of point in time. So investment assets have pulled back, but certainly not enough to offset the increases in the liability that we've discussed. So yeah, I think it's just probably worth just putting all those points into context. And then finally, just around Councillor Reeson's point, I'm guessing as we move forward that I think we're going to, I don't think it's just to do with ethical and responsible investment. I think, market capitalisation, I think just with the response to the climate emergency, I think the level of investment that we will see in those sectors will naturally see a lot of investment moving along with it. And that includes pension funds as well. So I think that's going to naturally happen anyway. And that's probably some of the sectors where there's going to be the strongest returns. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Well, before we move on, I'd just like to make a couple of comments from the Chair. I feel over the years that the accounts, when presented to the committee, the format and so on, has made them clearer and easier to read, and I welcome that. But there's two innovations this year which I think are very helpful. Right at the end of your papers, there's a paper, I think, from SIP for Understanding Local Authority Financial Statements, which I thought was a very useful contribution. And also, I think it's Appendix 2, the summary of the 2021 primary financial statements. I think that's also a very useful addition. But after that, I just have one question for you, Jonathan. It's in the narrative report. When you're talking about capital receipts, there's a difference between capital receipts in the text, which adds up to something like 7.4 million, and a 1 million in the table that's immediately above it. And I wonder whether you could just explain this for us.
Yes, thanks, Chair. And yeah, just scrolling down to the relevant section so I can point members to it. I think it's on page 37 of the overall pack. And I think the difference here, Chair, can be explained. So the where it says capital expenditure and financing, and it's heading the table there. What we're showing in that table, where it says capital receipts of 1.042 million, that is the amount of capital receipts that we're using during the financial year from the balance brought forwards to finance capital expenditure. So we would have had a brought forward balance, and don't know the figure to hand, but we would have used just over $1 million of that. But just below the table, we're further saying that we then received 7.45 million in receipts during the year. So the net of those two figures, something like 6.4 million, will have increased the capital receipts reserve that you see in the balance sheet. So I think that should cover it off, Chair. But yeah, I think the confusion is probably that we're trying to explain two separate things there, even though the one section follows directly after the table.
Thank you. I think that's helpful. Do we have any other comments or questions about the annual accounts? Statement of accounts. If not, then I'm going to move on. So thank you very much for all your contributions on that. The next item on the agenda is from internal audit. It's the operational plan. So I'm going to hand over now to Mr. Walton.
Thank you, Chair. So it's David Walton, Internal Audit Manager. And this paper is our internal audit operational plan for 21-22 financial year, submitted to the committee today for consideration for approval. The plan is drawn from our strategic audit plan, which maps out our audit strategy for the next 5 years and identifies over 300 potential audits across the authority. Each of those potential audit areas is risk assessed and allocated a high, medium or low risk rating based on various factors such as financial risk, new systems or contracts, changes in legislation, results of previous audits, and results from other assurance providers and so on. Departmental management teams are invited to put forward areas for inclusion in the plan. So the draft audit plan has then been compiled from the strategic 5-year plan and based upon the team's available resources. The plan includes allocations for mandatory grant work required by Welsh Government, for finishing work ongoing at year end, following up on previous audit recommendations, and for the provision of audit advice to departments across the authority. As usual, the plan includes an allowance for special investigations should any fraud, financial irregularity, or serious non-compliance be reported for investigation. The draft plan has been shared with chief officers ahead of this meeting. As usual, members will be provided with quarterly progress reports on the internal audit team's performance against the annual plan, and if any material revisions to the plan are required, these will again be reported to committee. I'll be happy to take any questions on the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. We'll just note the recommendation that the Governance and Audit Committee reviews, comments on and approves the draft internal audit plan for 21-22. Would anyone like to make any comments or ask any questions? Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Dave. I don't know whether this is the right point to ask this question in terms of your work programme. I asked a question in an earlier meeting today regarding the effects that COVID has had on attendance in work as opposed to sickness. Would your forward work plan consider the overall effects of lost time because of COVID, which are not really sickness? Is that within your remit, or where would we look for that sort of response?
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of attendance management, we have done a piece of work. We've recently completed a work on that. However, that was more to do with sickness, managing sickness and adherence to policies such as return to work, meetings, etc. I'm not aware of any plans at this stage to look at absences. I take it you mean from things like people isolating, etc., who are not able to come to work. So that isn't in our programme at the moment.
Why I asked the question was that there's a statistic this morning that the sickness level is about 11%, and they apparently don't include any time lost or whatever because of COVID effects. So I just wonder where it would show up, should it show up, and it is important for us to know the effects that COVID has had on the workforce, although not on sickness in those terms.
I think maybe Peter Davis would like to come in on this.
Yeah, it might help us. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, probably putting Dave in a slightly ill-informed position. In being,
I didn't mean that. I didn't mean it.
No, not at all, not at all. It's a very fair question that you asked, Councillor Reeson. So, just in terms of the sickness absence that we obviously capture as a council, we have, and since the start of the pandemic in March 2020, we have been capturing information on staff who have been unable to work as a consequence of for a variety of reasons beyond obviously normal sickness. So whether that's a matter of self-isolation as a consequence of them or their families being impacted, equally with staff who have been shielded and again unable to work. So that information's been captured all the way through and throughout, and obviously in the normal way that we operate the business, with business continuity arrangements obviously falling down to be the responsibility of chief officers and obviously heads of service and service managers. We obviously assess the impact of that on an ongoing basis, and I guess in the emergency that we've operated under during COVID, where there have been clearly circumstances where that has presented an issue, then clearly we have responded, and which is why we've seen redeployment of staff, between areas of the business in being able to respond equally in the way that we've had to obviously gear up and support the test, trace and protect system as well. But clearly, and if it's of interest to if there are things that fall within the remit of the audit committee, I guess that that are of interest in this area, then it's a matter, I guess, for Matt Phillips as head of Chief Officer for Governance and People to probably come back and provide further more detailed response to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everyone. Are there any other comments or questions for Mr. Walton? If not, then I'll just note that we've acted on the recommendation in the paper. So thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the audit plan concerning the Monmouthshire County Council Welsh Church Act Fund, which is a paper from Audit Wales. But I'm going to take this together with agenda item 10, which is the statement of accounts for the charitable trust funds. So I think what I'll just ask is for Mr. Lucy from Audit Wales to introduce his paper before I hand it over to Jonathan Davis again.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Gareth Lucy, Audit Manager with Audit Wales, with responsibility for Monmouthshire County Council. Yeah, as you mentioned, Chair, this is our audit plan document for our forthcoming audit of the Monmouthshire County Council Welsh Church Act Fund. So as members will be aware, there are 3 sets of trust fund accounts that the council is responsible for, and you'll see those sets of drafts coming forward in the next item. So that is the Welsh Church Act Fund, which we audit, the Farm School Endowment Trust Fund, which we carry out an independent examination over, so not quite as much work as a full audit, and the Llanelli Hill Social Centre Trust Fund, which is a relatively minor value and so doesn't require any external review from Audit Wales. So with this being the fund that we carry out a full audit over, we're required to present to you a full audit plan, and that's the intention of this document. So this just sets out some of the key information for our forthcoming audits, such as some of the key risks that we foresee, details about the fee, the timetable, and details of the team and so on. So just to summarise some of the main headlines for you as you look through the document, it's a relatively brief audit plan from our perspective, just given the relatively small size of the body overall. But the main headlines on page 5 of our report, so that's page 177 of the pack, you'll see a table there which summarises the principal financial statement risks. So those are the risks theoretically that we foresee at the moment in terms of accurate production of the accounts. It's a relatively brief table. You'll see one risk there that relates to the risk of management override of controls, which is a risk that is required to be included for all audited bodies, regardless of size or status. So you'll see that for every single audit that's performed. So there's nothing there that's particularly unusual for the Welsh Church Act Fund. And other than that, in terms of other areas of audit attention, really COVID-19, as you might expect, is probably the main area of risk when it comes to this year's audit, both in terms of just ensuring that the council has adequate resources in place to prepare the accounts, properly quality review them, and so on. And also just in terms of any particular disclosures that may be required. So members may remember in last year's audit report, there was an emphasis of matter paragraph, just summarising material valuation uncertainty that had been flagged up with some of the investment fund managers. It was correctly disclosed by the authority, but it was just a technical disclosure that needed to be made. And so this year we'll just need to review again and ensure that that disclosure is appropriately made in this year's sets of accounts. So I think that really that summarises the principal position for us in terms of audit risks. Other than that, page 7 of the report, so that's page 179 of the pack, highlights our audit fee, which we're proposing to maintain at the same level of last year. So that's £6,255. Our fee rates for individual members of staff haven't changed this year. And on reviewing our skill mix throughout our proposed audit team and the level of work that's required this year, and in terms of how we carry out that work, we don't foresee any significant changes in terms of how that work's going to be performed this year, hence why we've kept that fee at the same level again for 2020-21. And other than that, just to draw your attention to the timetable, so that's summarised over pages 8 and 9, that's 180 and 181. So our intention obviously is to audit these accounts in line with the statutory deadline for filing charity accounts. So these accounts need to be filed with the Charity Commission by the end of January. So our intention is to carry out the work before then. Obviously, you've just had the draft accounts presented to you. Our work over those main accounts is ongoing, clearly takes priority first of all, and may well run into the autumn. So this work will have to follow on behind that. So just to flag that up to your attention, that first of all, obviously our intention will be to meet that deadline, but just flagging up that obviously it's just a result really of the other work that we need to carry out this year, and it'll follow on after our audit of the main council accounts. So other than that, Chair, I don't really have anything else to add. Like I said, it's a relatively brief audit plan, but happy to take any questions that any members may have.
Thank you, Gareth. I'm going to move on to Jonathan Davies now to talk about the statements of accounts about the charitable trust funds. I'll just note that councillors Easton and Murphy have declared a personal interest as trustees of the Monmouthshire Farm Trust Fund. I don't believe that their interest is prejudicial, so I think the meeting can continue with their presence. So I'll go on to Jonathan Davies then to introduce his paper on the statement of accounts for the charitable trust funds, and note the recommendation that the Governance and Audit Committee note the draft statement of accounts for the above those bodies and highlight any queries and comments. So over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, quite a brief report, I guess. This is just highlighting the fact that we are bringing forward these draft statement of accounts for the 3 bodies listed, and that once those once the audit has taken place of the Welsh Church Fund, that will come back for approval again by this committee in November. But in the case of the School Endowment Trust and the Llanelli Hill Welfare Centre, those won't come back subsequently to this committee, and they will go forward to the various committees in question there that are listed. So, I think it's been quite a stable year in terms of these trust funds. The only real thing to point out, I guess, is in terms of the Welsh Church Fund and the investments that they hold. You'll see a significant recovery in those investments, and I guess again, that's something which reflects the kind of the turmoil that the markets were in 12 months prior to this. So we've seen a significant recovery in terms of those projected capital values and returns on those investments. So that's certainly a positive for the fund, and one that was, should have been expected, given that there has been some stabilisation in the market. But apart from that, Chair, like I say, quite a stable year, and nothing particularly to highlight at the moment. So happy to take questions on any of those draft statements.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, I'm taking questions and comments on either of the two papers. Did you have a question, Councillor Murphy?
Only a comment, really, Chair. Just to say, I thought the accounts looked strong. It was nice to see that bounce back, as Jonathan said. It was expected, because all the markets have bounced back. But it's good to see the accounts looking healthy. The amounts that are going to be able to be paid out to beneficiaries are going to be able to be maintained. So I think it was a good picture overall. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Eason?
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick question of Jonathan. Are you able to make any comments regarding the Roger Edwards Trust Fund in relation to its connection with the Monmouthshire Farm Trust?
Thanks, Councillor. That isn't something that I'd be able to comment on, unfortunately. I'd probably have to defer to a colleague of mine. So if you do want me to come back on that, by all means.
Nicola's just come in and said she can answer that. Nicola's just come in and said she can answer that for you.
Oh, brilliant.
Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. So Roger Edwards Trust Fund provide an income into Monmouthshire Farm Endowment School, and they provide 2/3 of their income after allowable expenses. The committee from the trustees from Monmouthshire Farm Endowment will be aware that they have offset a number of expenses over the last couple of years, which has meant that we have been unable to have any income from that trust at this current stage. So they are doing some heavy investment in some buildings that they own, and obviously they can offset those against the allowable expenses. So we haven't actually had any income for the last couple of years. I am in contact with the trustees, so I do get regular updates as to where they are in terms of the income that can come through. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you again, Chair.
Right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nicola.
Right. I shall move on then, if that's if we're all in agreement. And I'm going to look now at agenda item number 9, the internal audit annual report, which is for Mr. Walton again.
Thank you, Chair. So the report before you committee today summarises the work of the internal audit team in the last financial year and gives the overall internal audit opinion on the governance and risk management arrangements and the control environment within the authority. In doing so, it meets the key reporting requirements of the Chief Internal Auditor as set out in the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards and consistent with the statutory requirement for local authorities to make provision for internal audit. The first thing to say, and consistent with what colleagues have said earlier, is that clearly 2020-2021 was a very different year in so many ways for everybody, and clearly there was an impact on our internal audit work. As has been reported to committee previously, team members were redeployed at different points to assist first with COVID support grants to local businesses, and then in the second wave, 3 of the team were redeployed again, this time to help with track, trace and protect. 1 member of the team remains redeployed full-time on business grants today, though the rest of the team are back to our normal audit duties. Similarly, many of the teams and establishments that we audit were disrupted, and with movement across the county restricted, it was not possible for us to complete the number and range of audits that we would normally do. A revised audit plan was brought to committee in October 2020, but even that was subject to further disruption as the second wave of the pandemic arrived in the winter months. As a consequence of this, we completed just 9 opinion audits last year, compared to an average of 30 or so in most years. Clearly, every authority across the country will have faced similar disruption, and so Andrew has met with other chief auditors and taken advice from CIPFA, our professional institute, on the question of how to treat the annual audit opinion in such a disrupted year. It has been agreed that in reaching the audit opinion, assurance can be drawn from previous year's audit work in addition to the 2021 audits, and unless it was clearly inappropriate to do so. So this is the approach that we have taken here in Monmouthshire. We've also drawn on the work of other assurance providers, such as the results and overall opinion of the internal audit of the SRS, which is undertaken by Torvine Council's internal audit team. The outcomes of the SRS audits are included in Appendix B on page 199 of the pack, alongside the results of our own internal audits. From our own opinion work, it was pleasing to note that for the first time we did not report any limited assurance opinions, although of course it must be set in the context of the reduced number of audits that we did complete last year. So the overall audit opinion, which is given on page 191 of the pack, was therefore reasonable assurance, meaning adequately controlled, although risks identified which could compromise the overall control environment. Some improvements required. The opinion does not imply that internal audit has reviewed all risks relating to the organisation. The remainder of the report gives details of our other work throughout the year and provides our performance data where available. The section completed 57% of the revised audit plan by the end of the year, and any work that was not completed by year end was carried forward and assessed for inclusion in our new year plan. In terms of anti-fraud work, unfortunately, there was an element of fraud detected within the COVID business support grants. This again is a similar story for many local authorities and government departments across the UK. Most fraudulent applications were identified and rejected by the controls that we as an authority put in place, but a small number did get through. That's all I wanted to say by means of introducing the report, but I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. I'm throwing it open now to questions and observations. So, Councillor Smith.
Mr. Chairman. I've had sorry, Jim, not relevant. Well, it is relevant to this meeting. I received a phone call from Microsoft, and for some reason I had superimposed on my screen a picture of me and whatever that I couldn't get rid of. But I don't know if somebody's playing funny games. Right, coming back to the report, the extract from the SRS annual audit report. Okay, fine there. Now, in 2019, and in the accounts farther back at the beginning of this report, there was a situation, 2019, SRS basically changed hands, went over to Torfine. There was something of 2000, but there's also the possibility of us inheriting or acquiring a debt of somewhere over 80,000. Was it about 86,000, something like that? Where does that fit into this picture? There's the reference in the accounts that we have looked at of the possibility of a liability to Monmouthshire County Council of a debt of over £80,000 for SRS. Now that related to 2019 when we did a changeover, well, changed hands or moved to Torfine 2 years ago, and I just wondered what the situation was now. And I appreciate that your report is a different one to that one at the beginning, but I'm slightly confused. So thank you, Chairman.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is just check whether Mr. Walton has any information about that at all, or whether it's not really in the scope of his paper.
Yes,
no,
Chairman.
I probably have caught him, sorry.
I think I would have to refer to my finance colleagues for comment on that question.
Well, I can see that Jonathan Davis has turned on his camera, so does that mean you can help us with this?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, so just going back, I think the council is referring to an item that we're holding as a provision in the accounts relating to that winding up of the administration. We are continuing to hold that provision in the accounts. We don't as yet have an indication from Torfine as to whether that will crystallise at any stage. But at the moment we are holding it there prudently, I guess, just for coverage if that does come upon us as a liability. But yeah, we're continuing to work with Torfine to unravel some of that unrecoverable debt, and you know, as we work through this financial year, we should have further information. That's probably all I can say on it at the moment,
Yeah.
Chair.
It was just, Chairman, the fact that it's now 2 years since that occurred, or the awareness of and wondering. Can I also say, I liked the narrative to the accounts report. It was very readable. Thank you very much. And also, Chairman, I agree with you. The papers we had from the audit folks about how to be more useful members is very useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just check with Jonathan Davis, please? Is that an action point for him to provide further information? I
can certainly update the committee in the autumn, Chair, with any update that I've received. That's not a problem. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so can I now return back to Mr. Walton's paper? I've got somebody, Councillor Jordan, wishes to make a contribution.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You mentioned that so far as the business support grants were concerned, you detected some frauds. Would those, as a matter of course, be then reported to the police or not?
Yes, the frauds that we identified are reported to a number of different agencies. The first referral is to our bank's fraud team to try and recover any money that may be still left in the recipient accounts, and we were able to recover 25% of fraud losses by prompt notification to the bank. We refer also to the police, either to Gwent Police or latterly to Action Fraud, which is the national anti-fraud agency, which is run by the City of London Police. And we also refer them to the Local Government National Anti-Fraud Network, and the purpose in doing that is so that any details that we acquire can be shared with other local authorities across the UK, so that they can be on the lookout for any similar applications and identify them promptly. And obviously, in the same way, that's a reciprocal arrangement, so we receive alerts from them that other authorities have notified.
In broad terms, are you able to give us an indication as to the amount of money involved and the number of frauds actually detected?
What I can say is it is less than 0.5% of the total number of applications and the total value of applications. So less than 1 in 200 of the total applications.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I was going to ask more or less the same question as Councillor Jordan, just to add a little bit to it, though. Yes, you managed to recover that 25% through the banks, but is there any actions going on that's likely to recover us any more, or is that line of inquiry dead now?
Well, a couple of points to say. Firstly, that once the matters are referred to the police, then it's a matter for them really to sort of take forward as any sort of criminal investigation. So we would have to wait to hear. In some cases, we have already heard that they will not be taking any further action. Obviously, members will appreciate that they will have had a vast number of reported cases from across the authority, not just from across the country, sorry, not just from local authorities, but also central government, etc. And in some cases, we're still waiting to hear whether any police action will lead to recovery. But if I could provide assurance to members, from a Monmouthshire point of view, the fraud losses we have incurred have been covered by Welsh Government, because they have sort of guaranteed to cover any losses as long as there's no negligence on behalf of local authority staff. So any money that we have lost, we have managed to recover from Welsh Government.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you. Well, unless there are any more questions or observations, I'd just like to record that the Governance and Audit Committee have endorsed the annual report from Internal Audit. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
So the next item on the agenda is item number 11, the Audit Wales Work Programme. And I believe that Mr. Lucy is going to be introducing this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, so as you pointed out there, Chair, this is our work programme and timetable as at the 30th of June 2021. I suppose just to give a little bit of context for members, because this will be a new paper that you wouldn't have seen so far. And this paper is really just presented for information only, as opposed to any particular action. So the new Local Government and Elections Act requires the Auditor General to issue a formal timetable of his work and also that of other relevant regulators. So in this case, that includes Care Inspectorate Wales and Estyn. So that's a requirement under the new Local Government and Elections Act, and hence why we're presenting this paper to you now. You will have been used to seeing in our audit plan, we set out some details of our work programmes in terms of what the work we plan ahead for each year is, and some of the details of that work. But what that plan doesn't include is a formal timetable in terms of when we're expecting to carry out that work. So in order to fulfil our legal responsibilities under the Act, this is why this paper has come to you now, and to that end, this is why it's presented for information. So ultimately, that's all I really had to say about the paper itself, Chair. Just a few details, I suppose, in terms of how we propose to take this paper forward in future. what we're proposing is to issue quarterly updates of this timetable to our liaison group that we hold with officers of the council. So we hold regular quarterly liaison meetings to update them in terms of progress of our work and just coordination of the work that we're performing generally. So we propose to present more regular quarterly updates to that group and present an annual update then to Audit Committee itself. So what we propose going forward is that we'd present our audit plan normally in the Audit Committee around March or April time, and alongside that plan we could schedule this paper as well, which would go quite well with the plan. So the plan would set out effectively the work programme that we propose for the forthcoming year. This timetable then could give more information in terms of the planned work and when we propose to be doing that, so it would dovetail in quite nicely in that sense. Obviously this is the first iteration of this timetable as well. We'll continue to work with officers as well in terms of how we might be able to improve this in future, maybe link it in with other information such as key audit findings or other details in terms of audit progress as well. So in that sense, this is a bit of a work in progress. It's the first paper that we've produced under the Act, and so hopefully this is just something then that members will expect to see on a fairly regular basis going forward. So other than that, Chair, I don't really have anything else to add on this.
Thank you, Mr. Lucy. I will throw this open now to comments and questions if there are any, and also just say that if any of the officers from the authority wish to make a contribution at this point, they should indicate. Not getting anything at the moment. Peter Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just I think regardless of the local government and elections bill coming into play, the requirement, as Gareth just explained, for this to now be presented, I think it's just welcomed. I don't know what your views are, Chair, or in fact the audit committees, but I think just to have this clear line of sight is very helpful. And I think beyond audit committee, the fact that I guess through our regularised liaison meetings that officers have with Audit Wales, clearly we'll be able to track this sort of programme of work and activity. And as I've been speaking recently to Gareth about, as noted, just looking to determine as to which of these reviews, national, local, or otherwise, are best placed coming into audit committee, or in fact into select committees or elsewhere. So I welcome it really, and I think it will just probably improve things at both an operational officer level as it will at a committee level as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Well, just a bit more of an opportunity now to make a contribution if anyone wants to. If not, I'd like to thank Mr. Lucy for his paper and just note that it's been presented to the committee for their information. Agenda item 11 is 12 is the forward planner. I don't know if at this stage anyone wishes to make any contributions to what's in the forward planner. Mr. Davis, Peter Davis.
Thank you, Chair. My technology seems to be working again. Yeah, I think it's just a highlight and probably for the benefit of the committee, consistent, I guess, Chair, with the exchanges that we've had in recent days and with Gareth from Audit Wales as well. So there'll need to be, I think, a slight update to the matters to be agended for the meeting on the 2nd of September. I think, and Gareth can come in and comment himself, but I think I'm minded to bring to the 2nd of September committee or certainly to ask if Audit Wales would be happy to bring forward their audit review on the financial sustainability of the council, which is a report we have now finalised. But I think there is merit in bringing that through to the September committee, because subsequently I'm intent in the October committee in bringing forward a report, which again needs to be added to the forward work programme, a report on the assessment of the robustness of the budget process and on adequacy of reserves. So I know Gareth has sort of responded to us to confirm he's sort of flexible around that. So my suggestion is that we do bring that forward into the 2nd of September meeting. I think the Q1 internal audit report will still hold. I think my conversations with Dave Walton have confirmed that, and I think Dave Walton, Andrew Wathen from internal audit may also be looking to bring forward one further report as well in terms of the internal audit charter. So I think we'll have those 3 items, and we will probably lose from the work programme that you have in front of you. We'll probably lose that paper currently scheduled on the 2nd of September around the reserves policy, because that will in fact fold into the report that I'm looking to bring into the October meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Mr. Lucy, anything to add?
No, nothing really to add, Chair, just to back up really what Peter was saying. More than happy for our financial sustainability report to come into the September meeting, so not really an issue from our perspective.
Right, thank you for that. Right, well, all that remains for me to do then is just note, as we have already mentioned, that the date of the next meeting. Sorry, I've got to go to the minutes. Can we just check up on the minutes of the previous meeting, the one held on 1st of July, and whether there are any observations or changes anyone would particularly like to make?
Happy to move, Chair.
Yeah, second, Chair.
Okay, we've got a move and a second, so we'll accept the minutes as a correct record. Accept Councillor Smith.
Only question as to has the recruitment started for the lay members for the committee? What progress and how's it being undertaken? I just wondered. Thank you. Minutes are fine.
I don't know whether Mr. Davis has any information he can give us on that.
Sorry, Chair. Could the question be repeated, please? Was that for me or Jonathan?
Councillor Smith wants to know if any progress has been made on the recruitment of lay members for the Governance and Audit Committee.
So just to confirm, we will be looking to arrange a session with Audit Committee members just in terms of a review of the Audit Committee, which will be held outside a committee, probably subsequent to the 2nd of September meeting. Part of that will obviously confirm, beyond the verbal update that Andrew Wathen provided at the last meeting about the local government and election bill changes, which, as Councillor Smith rightly refers to, includes what will be 4 lay members sitting on the Governance and Audit Committee with effect from next May. In terms of the specific question around the recruitment, that is something that Andrew is currently pursuing at the minute with the WLGA. And I can't remember whether he specifically mentioned it at the last meeting, but the WLGA is looking to coordinate a recruitment process for lay members coming onto Governance and Audit Committees, in fact, across Wales. So we will be looking to work with them on that and to clearly ensure that our requirements are met in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Well, let's record then that we've accepted the minutes of the previous meeting as a correct record. And all I need to do now is just to confirm the date of the next meeting will be 2nd of September 2021 at 2 o'clock. So thank you everybody for contributing to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.